one's going to
uncomfortable.
immediately join. You're going to have to be willing to do that and believe that dancing crazy was a good idea today.
Yeah. Yep. And building advocacy is something I think you still have to do as a leader. Kind of back to that my way is the highway conversation. You could probably get people to do something once, but I think if you can build advocacy, you can get people to do things more consistently over time, especially as trust is built. And so, but yeah, this role is nothing but uncomfortable, and just being comfortable being in the uncomfortable. I think that just comes with the territory. So.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to have you as a guest on today's episode. I'd like to do just a brief introduction. Won't do you justice, so please, I'm going to ask you to supplement that. But I really enjoyed our conversation. So everybody, Matt is the CEO of Maroc, which is a Dallas-based, fantastic, really well-known, highly reputable multi-unit marketing firm that I'm going to ask Matt to give us a little bit more background on. And Matt's been there quite a long time. Maroc's been around a while, and Matt's been around there a while, which is kind of a unique thing in today's world. His longevity really has got a tremendous backstory to it, and just his career journey is very, very interesting and inspiring. But what I really loved when we talked, Matt, was your thoughts on leadership, your thoughts on values, your thoughts on how you build a strong team and a strong culture. And that's what I'm excited to kind of dig in with you today. But again, thank you for being here. I'd love just share a quick little 2-minute background and then a little bit of background on Maroc again for our audience before we get started, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for having me, Gary. Quick background. So been at Maroc for 24 years, which is kind of a blessing in our industry. I worked at a couple agencies before I came to Maroc, so I kind of knew that I'd found something good when I got here, and committed to stay. And I'm a native of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, grew up in East Dallas, and have been fortunate to be able to find a career within my home market as well. And I'm a father of 4, and with an age range of 9 years, so that keeps me pretty busy outside of work. And then from a Maroc perspective, it's a almost 45-year-old agency that was started by 2 gentlemen who are still part of our board. And it's a lot of the business in the beginning was built around McDonald's, which is still an account we work on, but beyond that, we've been able to grow into a lot of different types of business. But if there's a commonality, it's multi-unit or multi-location businesses for the most part. And so we're about 300 people. About 60% of those people are in DFW. The rest is kind of spread out across the U.S. and having a lot of fun.
Yeah. So 21 years, did you say, with them, or 24? 24 years with the same firm. That is phenomenal, especially, I want to call marketing as a high turnover, but that's rather unique, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I don't know that was a stated goal when I came to Maroc. I had, like I said, I'd been at a couple other agencies, and when I came to Maroc, I was looking for 2 things. I said, one, I want stability, just because I've been through 2 really kind of roller coaster situations. I feel like I've checked that box after 24 years. And then secondly, I wanted a place where I could have unlimited growth and feel like that's accomplished. And I told, the owner of the company when I came here, as long as those 2 things exist, I'll be here for the long term.
All right. So I remember that specifically when we talked, is it has given you that unlimited growth potential. Well, have you reached that limit now as CEO? Do you believe you've limited your growth potential, or do you see more growth ahead for you in your current role?
Oh, I absolutely always see growth. One of my commitments is every day, how do you advance yourself and the company? And that's something we strive for. Post-COVID, we've had really some of the best growth and momentum as an agency. And I think we're just starting to tap into stuff that we had never tapped into before as an agency. So, for me, as long as that opportunity exists, both personally and with the agency, then, it's going to continue to be fun and something I put time into. So
would you say you only reach the top if you assume that you've you've peaked? Like there's
Yeah,
always a higher peak to
totally.
go after?
Yeah, totally. I think it's funny, and I have to be cognizant that I'll tell people all the time, like, I'm not a big fan of titles. And I obviously knowingly I say it's easy to say that when you have the CEO title, but you have to
Right.
be cognizant of that. But really, to me, that recognition of kind of the role and responsibility you have, that doesn't mean that you can't grow. I mean, there's CEOs of three-person companies. Their responsibilities look a lot different than, a global company that's has 10,000 employees. And so I think there's always space to grow and get better. So,
Yeah. So who do you get your inspiration from, or who do you get your mentorship from in your current role? Is it your founder board? Is it other peers? How do you continue
yeah,
to push yourself?
it was interesting. And I don't remember if I told you the story or not, but when I moved into the role, I had 2 days notice before I was in front of my company. And so I didn't have a lot of preparation or background, and nor was I even asking for the job. And so kind of an unusual circumstance to start it. So
Were you
in the first couple of
voluntold into a C? You were voluntold into a CEO role?
Yeah, essentially, we our former CEO had retired,
Okay.
and there'd been maybe a 2 or 3 year period, 2 or 3 month period, where I think the board was thinking through things, and basically on a Tuesday they called me in and put an org chart in front of me and said, "What do you think?" And by the way, you can't say no. And then Thursday it was in front of the company, and I was answering questions about what I saw for the vision of the company, and I said, "Give me a minute," and and in looking back on it, I didn't know what I didn't know, and maybe that actually helped me. But back to your question, the first couple of years, I put myself in the Vistage program,
Okay.
if you're familiar with that, and I partly just because I wanted to be around and see how other people in this role behaved, and the kinds of problems that they were solving. I wanted to kind of expedite not just experiencing the things that I was experiencing, but kind of see what other people were, because knowing I would encounter those as well. And I would say those couple years were fantastic. I got to the point where I recognized most of the people that were in my peer group were running much smaller organizations. And
Hmm.
so I'm actually now in a group that is very targeted to our industry. So it's people that are running agencies around my size. And we meet in person twice a year, but pretty consistently throughout the year. So that has been fantastic. But I've also been one, even before this role, all through my career, seeking people that are outside the Maroc ecosystem, for mentorship as well. When I first moved into this role, there was a gentleman who runs a global nonprofit. And his first advice to me, because we had a bit of a challenge in front of us, he said, "What you're about to do is a 2 year process, and you can't shortcut it. And you've got put your plan in place and work the plan, much like a garden." And so advice like that was tremendously helpful, for me. So I've always tried to have like professional people connected into the Morocco ecosystem, and then people outside of it as well.
Yeah, I think that was a brilliant move on your part, especially you being essentially thrust into the role, and you had to
Right.
figure out and scramble. You didn't insulate, right? You
Right.
actually expanded and reached
Yeah.
out. A lot of what I find with a lot of the business owners that I work with and CEOs is it's lonely at the top,
Hmm.
right? And so and it has to be an external support network. It's rarely going to come from inside. So seeking
Right.
out the peer groups or other mentors is really important. It sounds like it's been tremendously helpful in your growth.
Yeah, 100%. And you nailed it. I mean, I think that was the first thing that I learned in this role. You tend to learn most of what's not working within an organization, and
Right.
you don't hear a lot of what is working, and you don't have a lot of people to have those conversations with, for lots of reasons. And so, yeah, getting that kind of outside in voice of people who'd been there, done that was important. I'm the first one to raise my hand and say, I'm not sure what the right step is here, but also I have to figure it out. I can't not, you can't avoid the conversation or decision.
Right. It reminds me. So I forget where I heard this quote, but when you're in your role, when you're at the top, so to speak, right? And I know you don't go on titles,
Sure. Yeah.
but from an org standpoint or an accountability standpoint, as we talk about it, right, you are ultimately accountable. All the easy decisions have been made. The ones that reach
Yeah.
your desk are the ones that people struggle
Yeah.
to make. So,
Yeah.
and so that gives you a very interesting bias in your organization. So how do you stay balanced when
Yeah.
all the difficult decisions are coming to you? How do you realize that, hey, this is part of the nature of the
Yeah.
game and it's okay?
Yeah.
You know, you must have some trust that the good stuff's getting done and
Yeah.
only the difficult's coming to you.
100%. I think there's two things that I would say to that. The first was certainly in the first year, I didn't know that that's what was happening, and so I just thought the sky was falling. And so
Right.
there came a point where I mentally just decided I had to start finding ways to file those kinds of things in a part of my brain that I needed. If I needed to access it, I could. But if I kind of sat with it at the front of my brain all the time, I wasn't going to move forward in a positive way. And so I had to learn to start, in essence, kind of putting it in a filed cabinet. But I think, secondly, too, it just puts more of an emphasis for you on being close to your team to know that this isn't the only story. So if you're going to just sit back and react, that's a problem. And one of our founders, I always forget the acronym, but he would always talk about manage by walking around. So BWA, thank you. And it's harder in a hybrid environment, and 40% of our company is not in Dallas, so it's more of an onus on me to kind of be staying connected and engaged, so that you get the real conversation and hear the good things too.
Right. Yeah, it's easy to lose track of the stuff that's working because all is the problems that come to you and bubble up, right, as part of the
Right.
role.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about what I want to. That's one interesting concept about leadership. Tell me a little bit more about how would you define your leadership style?
So I definitely feel like, and this is actually one of the reasons I ended up moving on from Vistage. I definitely believe in the servant leadership mentality. And I think, to me, that's becoming more important for these newer generations that are coming through, and advertising tends to be inherently a younger workforce. So I think we feel some of that shift. And I was in a group that was more kind of my way or the highway, and there's times for that. But if that's kind of your only style, I don't know that that's effective, especially with these younger generations. There needs to be a bit more of a why behind what you're doing, and also them seeing you in the trenches with them too. So
Right, working. Yeah, willing to actually do the work as well. So,
yeah.
do you think, is that a core philosophy of Vistage, that it's a command and control, or
No,
was
I
it
think it
just your
just
particular
happened.
group? Or
I think it was my particular group.
okay,
Yeah, so I wouldn't put it on them at all. I think they probably have more of a mixture. Just
I
some of
would
the
hope.
personalities that I was in
Yeah.
were a little stronger. Yeah.
So now, probably germane to nothing, but if advertising is skews younger as a workforce, where do aged out people go? Where do people age out to? Like, they don't stay
Yeah.
in advertising? Do they move into other?
Yeah. It's funny. I used to, in the early part of my career, it was always a topic, and now I find myself on the other side of it. We used to joke about advertising is kind of a game of survivor, and people get eliminated along the way. And I think some of it, a lot of people from agencies end up going client side, so that
Okay.
is one area. But then a lot of people will switch careers and pivot. I mean, the amount of people that have gone into real estate from advertising is kind of a funny stat line.
Interesting.
And it does, and there's been actually recent articles on it, that there's a bit of an ageism challenge that advertising has. And I think that's something that I think people are starting to come to terms with. Is we do kind of tend to push people out. Some of it, frankly, is we're asked to manage things on tighter and tighter budgets, and so
Okay.
to be able to fund that, you have to kind of have a pipeline of lower salaries to
Yeah.
feed that. But I think there's ways to combat that. So
So what are you actively doing right now in the face of that, knowing that there's that pressure, but there's a lot of value in experience.
Yeah.
And if you right, so how do you blend that?
yeah, and I think you have to look at value beyond the cost of an employee in that situation, because the cost of replacing an employee is pretty well documented, that it's also, cost adverse as well. But I think, to me, my former CEO, one of his favorite sayings, which I've held on to, is kind of growth cures all problems. And so I think as long as we're growing and have momentum, those aren't challenges that we have to combat, because you can continue to grow and give the career growth that everybody wants. To me, that finding that balance where you can give people growth and the company's growing is, to me, the perfect combination. Easier said than done, but that tends to be where I focus.
I love that. One thing I tell every young professional is it's better to work in a growing company.
Yeah,
There's just everything is more,
everything.
right? Everything. It's more fun. It's more exciting. There's more opportunities come up.
Yeah,
There's, you don't go through the layoffs. You don't go through the, more and more work coming on only your desk type of stuff. I mean, this syndrome eventually happens. But yeah, when things are growing, right? Rising tide lifts all boats.
right.
It reminded me of the other part of this. Have you heard of the doorman fallacy?
I haven't.
Okay, so it goes like this. Hotel is taken over, or consultants come into hotel, and they look to cut costs, and they go, you don't need to pay someone a full-time salary to open a door. You can just put an automatic door in. And so they let the doorman go, and sure enough, the bottom line improves immediately, but very, very quickly and steadily, the top line declines. Because
Right.
without a doorman, you can't charge premium rates for hotel. Without a
Right.
doorman, you've got nobody to
Right.
get cars and flag down taxes. You've got vagrants on the street. So there's all these intangibles. If you just look at an individual as what they contribute, like punch in, punch out,
Right.
you lose the bigger picture of what,
Yeah.
right? Experienced people who've been around share their wisdom with others,
Right.
share their
Right.
experience with others. If they're constantly aging out and moving away, how
You're
much
starting
is
over.
leaving with
Yeah.
them, right?
Correct. Yeah. 100%. 100%. And I think if you can have the balance of the wisdom that they have, but also obviously you want people that are continuing to grow and evolve and develop themselves, like that's somebody you're going to want to hold on to forever. So, and that's actually, we have a wall in our offices that is, we basically at 5 years you get a caricature, and so we have a wall of all of those people, and so we hold that pretty dear in terms of tenure is a good thing, not a bad thing. So,
That's really cool. I haven't heard that idea before. So it's like a
yeah.
hall of fame almost.
Yes, yes. And it's funny because we were just commenting the other day because I was looking at some of the new caricatures that came in, and they're getting nicer. In the early days, they were a bit meaner, and so I'm considering having mine redone. So,
I think mine would have a rather large nose.
well, it's funny because I actually have a small nose and small ears. They actually made them giant. So normally you go
Ironically
after
so, right?
yeah, they go after the stuff that is kind of low hanging fruit. They went the other direction.
Yeah,
with
it's
me.
childhood
So,
cruelty. Let's face it, a
yes,
caricature
yes.
is not a nice thing.
No, no.
So that's good. So sense of humor. So how does this? So I want to pivot a little. So in terms of growth mindset, is that part of your core values at Maroc? I'd love to hear what your core values are at Maroc, and then we can get into like how do you use them.
Sure. Yeah. So we have 5 values as an organization. I can go through those. So integrity is definitely a foundational one. Our 2 founders talked all the time about doing the right thing, and it wasn't always the best business decision, but it was the right thing to grow long-term partnerships. And I think if you were to ask them, that would be kind of the foundational of the 5. But beyond that, we have tenacity and curiosity, which are an interesting combination, and then humanity and diversity are
Okay.
the others. And so, to your answer on growth, I think growth very much fits in the tenacity and curiosity
Yeah, I can see
realm.
that.
And agencies tend to look at growth 2 ways. There's obviously new relationships that we can form, and we're very dedicated and have a strategy around that, but also growing existing business. And again, that's kind of a win-win. If our brands that we work on are growing, then we're doing a good job, and in turn, there's more opportunity for us. So that tends to be like the 2 kind of levers that we try to pull, and then we have strategies underneath those for both.
What is I think it's Fisher Investments that says we do better when our clients do better.
Yeah, it's 100% true.
It's totally
So
true, right?
yeah,
Especially in a model like yours, where now all of a sudden you've helped them grow beyond, say, a small regional brand, and now they're expanding into other markets.
exactly,
Their budgets with you will naturally grow. So
exactly,
that's
exactly.
really cool. All right, so
Yeah,
now with these core values, we spoke quite a bit about core values and your true belief in how they are really inherent. They're not just words on a wall.
right.
How do they give me just a couple ways they show up like in the real day-to-day world for you? Because
Yeah,
this is one that I obviously lean into with all of my clients. Like core
yeah,
values, we start like
yeah,
literally that's what we start when we start laying out a vision. It's what are your core values? That's number one. So
yeah,
love to
yeah.
hear your take on it.
Yeah, so one thing that we do as an organization, and this isn't necessarily day to day, but I think it impacts the day to day. We once a year will recognize, and it's actually voted on by employees, somebody that represents each of those values and hold them up in front of the company as this is the standard that we want to see. And again, it's peer voted, and then we essentially it's a big deal, and we award that each of those people basically, you know, a, kind of a memento and certificate of recognition for that. And so that's been one way that because I think a lot of organizations they have the values somewhere, but are they truly like living that out on a day to day basis? And so, and then the other thing, you're making decisions constantly. I think to me, we try to interject into that decision making process. Does this line up with this? Or, even goals that we're setting for teams or individuals, how are those goals informed by, or is there a filter on from the value perspective too? So,
So you're actually checking business decisions against core values. Are they in alignment with our core values?
yes, yeah,
That's
there have been times we've passed on situations or relationships simply because it didn't line up with values. So, which is hard. Again,
it is.
that's a hard conversation to have. So,
Yeah, and it's also that's rare to hear. I mean, people tend, at least the typical is these are our core values. We expect you to behave this way. This is what we want out of the culture. So it's usually like a hiring and promoting thing. Rarely do
yeah,
they take it to the next level. I do have some clients that want their suppliers and key
right,
vendors to align, but
yeah,
I haven't heard someone actually run it through like a business decision filter. That's really cool.
yeah,
We had a
yeah,
moment. We had a moment. We were a recruiting company. That's one of my companies. Anyway, we started hiring for a bar and grill,
mm,
not realizing that the owner of the bar and grill also had let's say, a gentleman's club. It's
yeah,
called a gentleman's club.
yep,
And so it didn't take long to figure out that he was interviewing hostesses for the bar and grill and
mm,
and
yeah,
offering them other jobs. And so, boom, we had to end the relationship because it was just not within the
yeah,
values, right?
right, right,
And so it kind of falls down to the integrity thing. It's like, you know,
yeah,
we didn't support that. It is not that we judged it. It's just like it just doesn't fit, and I couldn't put my people
yeah,
right. I couldn't have my
yeah,
teams because now you're asking people to do something, and so we had to walk.
yeah,
But it didn't. It did ultimately was a business decision through core values, but weren't explicit that way. It was more like, oops,
right, right,
maybe if we had ran that filter originally, we might have avoided it.
yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
and to your point, I think there's sometimes we're in the midst of something and we realize, like you guys, that this doesn't really align. So, I definitely find that it's not a fluid or black and white process, if you
It's
will. It's more fluid. So
Yeah. Do you find, because this can happen with people as well, do you find that when something's not quite right, part of when you're digging in and trying to figure out why it's not quite right, you might go, oh, it's because of a value misalignment. That ultimately is the root cause. Is that it's not, everything else like on paper seemed to work, but there was this misalignment with values.
Right. Yeah. And that's,
right.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard because, as a business person, I don't know. I do think that part of a growth mindset is having optimism and curiosity, and you can tend to talk yourself into things. So to your point, there's been times where we're down the road with something and our gut just kept signaling something was off, and you have to sometimes lean into that even if you don't want to. So it's hard.
Yeah. So have you found that when you make those decisions, that ultimately in the mid to long term, things work out better because you end up then doubling down or developing the relationships, the long-term relationships that are a fit when you cut those out?
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever gone back and regretted, I guess, a decision like that. While it may have hurt in the short term, in the long term, and I think sometimes the opposite will happen in the sense that we actually have to dig in harder on a situation that may be easier to walk away because of our values as well. So sometimes it's fighting through a situation, or even just how we're approaching a difficult situation. And we've had clients essentially either come back to us or they move on to something else, and like, because of how you handled that, like, we want to come back and work with you. So I think it can show up in different form, shapes and sizes.
Yeah, it's not always just an excuse to exit a relationship.
Right.
Absolutely. It may actually make you do something and go above and beyond because it's the right thing to do in the moment.
Yeah, I'll give you a great example. We had a situation several years ago where we and another agency were working on a piece of business that ended up moving to a different agency, third agency. We handled it with, I told the team, handle the transition as professionals, as if you're going to be working on this business a year from now. The other team basically just kind of left them high and dry. And you can imagine who they came back to first, when they, realized they made the wrong decision. And so, it's the right thing to do long-term just because of who you are, but also it tends to pay off from a business perspective as well.
Absolutely. So how do you employ your core values in your hiring process? How does that show up?
Yeah, I think I would say, we have different things depending on the level of person that we use to vet people. And, it's tricky because I'm a believer that, I think most people believe this, that you want complementary people, not just continue to hire the same exact kind of person. And that sometimes can be challenging because you're like, oh, this guy brings a different whatever, but it still needs to align with the value. That needs to be the common denominator. So, I would say even from my senior leadership team, that was my biggest lesson early on, was trying to push too far away from who I was at the core, because I thought it was, something the company could use and need, without realizing you can get different skill sets, but the common denominator should still be you're grounded in the same values. And some of that I think is gut, frankly, and some of it I think is asking the right questions. And we use a couple different tools for more high level hires, a thing called Omni Profile that essentially kind of matches you up against the people that matches the person up against the people that they would be working with, and what are the gaps in terms of how they work. And sometimes some of that surfaces there as well.
Okay. So that you brought up an interesting point. If there's this concern, right? If you have this clearly defined set of core values, how do you prevent just getting this homogeneity, right? Because that can sound counter to diversity. Now, you mentioned diversity was one of your core values, but if it's we want all of our people to be the same, that's not what you're saying with core values. You don't want all your people. They can have different backgrounds. They can have different education, different work experiences, different life experiences. It's just integrity is really big for you guys, so you want people with integrity.
Yeah, people you can trust. Yeah,
you can have a fairly diverse group of people that all have integrity, right?
Right.
But you have to be mindful of not cookie cuttering it, right?
Correct.
So
Yeah.
is that how you're adding
Yeah.
these other
100%.
tools, or is it that's just that level of sophistication that as you do this a while you start to figure that
Well,
out?
I think there's some of the knowing it when you see it kind of thing, but also we'll miss too, and I think it's okay to acknowledge when we've missed that this isn't working. And ultimately, I cannot think of a situation where the person, at the time it didn't feel great if we moved on, but they probably recognized the same thing, that they were not a fit for how we were working and operating as well. So, in those cases, you need to call it as soon as you can and move on. So
That's so. I can I quote you on that when I talk to my
sure,
clients,
sure,
right? This is a short-term pain for long-term gain, and when you can
yeah,
have an objective black and white discussion. Here's what we're seeing. Here's what we need to
yep,
see. You give the person the opportunity, but oftentimes they'll self-select out.
right,
If it's clear, they have an
hmm,
opportunity. They can choose to show up and behave differently, but it's their
right,
choice. And if they're not
right,
ultimately going to be happy in a situation like that,
right,
it's the classic. There's some offices that are highly collaborative,
hmm,
and there are some lone wolves out there, and
right,
sometimes you want and need a lone wolf.
hmm,
There's nothing wrong with that person per se, but in a
right,
highly collaborative environment, everyone's going to be unhappy,
yeah,
right? So if you just make
yeah,
it clear, right,
hmm,
and then a choice can be made, but it's actually much less dramatic, I find, when you can
hmm,
have that open, honest conversation about it, because it moves away from it just doesn't feel right. Because
right,
no, here's what we're seeing,
right,
here's what we want,
right,
and you have a choice, right?
right,
Not
right.
saying it's ever that easy, Matt, but in
No,
theory, right? But
right,
the
right.
sooner you address it. So, can you give me an example of one that you let linger, that you regretted letting it linger? Like you thought
Oh
maybe you could
yeah,
turn it around at some point and you didn't have the hard
yeah.
discussion?
I mean, I think that happens all the time. I'm thinking particularly we went
Like
through a
every
stretch
time?
where, yeah, we went through a stretch where retention was kind of a challenge just
Oh,
because our industry was hiring at a very high level.
oh, yeah.
This is kind of like 2 years into COVID. And so, you know, everyone on the team was kind of in this protect and defend mode. And there comes a point where um, you're actually hurting the team by having, a bad hire more than you're helping them. And even though they look at it as, even if I'm getting 50% out of this person, it's better than zero. And I don't know. Those tend to come more to mind than not. We had to just kind of recognize we were holding on in areas that we shouldn't, and we needed to, as painful as it was, rip the band-aid and move. And again, I think they were just as miserable too.
Right. And again, I'm going to quote you on that one because
Yeah,
I think that is the trap. People want to do it. People want to
yeah,
hold to their core values. They want to hire, fire, reward, recognize.
yeah,
But then you get these moments. Oh, this person that was really important for this key account,
yeah.
or the sacred cow, or the oh my gosh, we're
Right.
already down two people. We can't afford to lose another. And what you don't see is the hidden cost of
Yeah,
the bad culture fit.
yeah,
It's always because that's always hidden. It's really hard to get the number on that, but it's
yeah,
true, right? I mean, you've seen it enough that
yeah,
it's usually not as painful to make that as it seems like it's going to be,
yeah,
and then it actually helps everybody else, and you don't,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I have a great story about that. And this is early on in my managing career. We had a rock star on our team, and we had somebody who was kind of toxic, and they happened to be really close friends.
Oh,
And what was interesting is at the time, a leader on the team had the idea of, well, we can fix the toxic person by putting the rock star with the toxic person
yeah.
and letting them spend more time together and even put their desks next to each other, all of that kind of stuff. And you can probably see where this is going. We actually lost the rock star and the toxic person stayed. And
Oh,
so
I'm sorry.
it
I
was
know that's not funny.
no,
That's not
no. And
funny.
it was it was actually the exact opposite of what we were trying to solve for. And I actually got a note several months later from the person who was kind of affected by the toxic person, and realizing that she made a mistake and had been influenced by that person, and that was some small, you know I don't know, salve on the wound, but it was a lesson. I was like, I'm never making that mistake ever again. So
That's
you,
uh,
you know take care of the rock stars, and then eh, take care of the situations where they're not. So
how many times do we ask our best people to compensate for
hmm
others,
oh, I've been there.
right?
I've
That's
been
what we're
there.
doing, right? We're
Yeah.
asking our best to compensate, to do extra, right? And we don't see it that way in the moment, but that's really what the message we're sending is: we're going to tolerate this other stuff, and
Yeah.
you're going to raise above and beyond because you're so good. You're going to right help fix this problem. It's like
Right.
right?
Right.
It's not a fair situation. It it's also you can't control osmosis where it flows, right?
Right.
It's not always going to flow from good to bad. It might go
No.
the other way.
Right.
It reminds me of one of the quotes that I don't know if it's a quote. I think somebody said it in one of my previous roles. One of the leaders on the team made it clear. They were like, "Look, rock stars or A players." Their quote was, "A players prefer to play. They want to play with other A players.
Yeah. Yeah. They want to be better.
They want to be
So
better and they want to be challenged." If you think you're like doing your
yeah.
rock star a favor by not bringing other top talent to keep them on their toes and challenging them, they're going to get bored. They're going to move to where they're feeling like they're
Yeah.
part of a team. Nobody wants to be. And by the way, the person who wants to be the rock star, like that's their persona, that's usually the toxic person. That's the
Yeah.
person who's competitive. That's wants
Yeah.
to be right. Wants to be known
Yeah.
as the best or the And it's like no,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
doesn't work that way.
Yep. Yeah.
So you
There's
keep
definitely
them around
healthy.
at your own peril. You keep your B players around at your own peril. The
Yeah.
peril is your A players are going to recognize that that's the standard, and they're either going to start to slack off because they know it, or they're going to go seek some place where there's a higher level of talent because that's
Right.
the team they want to be on.
Right. 100%. 100%. It's funny. You made me think of a story. My very early
Yeah.
in my career, actually, my first job out of college, I was being trained by somebody who fit more of that category. And this is literally the first advice I got in my first professional role. If you do something faster than they expect you to, don't turn it in, hold on to it. And so that you don't create the expectation of this can be done faster. And obviously, like, red flags went up all over the place for that. And so she actually ended up being out for about a week for different reasons, and I picked up all of her workload and got all of her stuff done. And my goal wasn't like to replace her, but I ended up replacing her, and it was kind of a lesson early on of you know because I'm the type that needed to, exactly what you just said. Like, I needed to be put in environments where I was going to be pushed, otherwise I was going to go crazy. And you know creating an environment where people like me can run free is important. And that,
Right,
so
right. You got to provide that challenge. You also got to recognize, unfortunately, that you're never going to get a whole company
yeah, totally.
at that level.
No,
Right.
no. Yeah, my former CEO talked about, and this isn't revelation. I've heard people talk about this before too, but you typically have, like, if you can get a third of the company excited and moving, they will influence the second third, and then there's another third that just never is going to be on board with anything. And so he's always like, focus on that first third, and if you can get them excited, then you're going to get the second third, and that's the momentum you're going to get, or need. So
Simon Sinek says something similar to that. It's
yeah.
like, it's not exactly a tipping point thing, but Simon Sinek has something about that. It's like you go after those. He did it in like an early adopter crowd.
Yeah.
I apologize for that. I don't know why I didn't turn that off. But
Okay.
it is very similar in that as you get the people who will be your champions really
Yes.
fired up because they'll bring in that second cohort, the third
Yeah.
cohort. They're showing
Yeah.
up for work.
Right.
They're getting a paycheck. That's okay
It's
so
like
long as they're not disruptive. Right.
there's a YouTube video that you've probably seen from years ago of the guy on the hill that was dancing. I don't know if you've ever seen that one. If you haven't, look it up. But
Okay.
it's basically the gist of it is they're in like this public park area, and this guy just gets up and starts crazy dancing, and everybody's kind of looking at him and wondering what's going on. The second guy gets up and starts dancing, and then next thing you know, the whole hill's
Now it's a
dancing with
party.
them. Yeah, exactly.
Now it's
And it's funny. So before I moved into this role, I considered myself an expert at being the second guy, and it took a little bit of a mental adjustment to realize, when you're the first guy now, then you have to go find the second guy to
oh yeah,
champion stuff, and that was kind of a role shift for me.
yeah.
So anyway, the
I
psychology
no.
of that is interesting. So
Well, so this is interesting. So let me ask you about that, because is that learning to live in discomfort? Is the
oh
key to
yeah,
that like going like when you're in a leadership role like this, and you need to go and be the person who starts dancing crazy,
yeah, yeah, 100%. I
and
think
no one's going to
uncomfortable.
immediately join. You're going to
Yeah,
have to be willing to do that and believe that
yeah,
dancing crazy was a good idea today.
yeah. Yep, and building advocacy is something I think you still have to do as a leader. Kind of back to that "my way is the highway" conversation. You could probably get people to do something once, but I think if you can build advocacy, you can get people to do things more consistently over time, especially as trust is built. And so, but yeah, this role is nothing but uncomfortable, and just being comfortable being in the uncomfortable. I think that just comes with the territory. So,
Yeah, learning to embrace the uncomfortable. It's tough,
yes.
but I think you're doing a great job.
Well, I appreciate.
No, I enjoyed our previous conversation. I just knew it after we talked. I was like, oh, this is a guy who would make a great guest here, because you not only do you have like just a really calming aura about you. You're not high strung like a lot of CEOs. Maybe you're a high achiever, but you're not
Right.
high strung, which I think is a
Right.
gift. But you have a more evolved view of things, and I just really enjoyed learning some things today from you.
I
So
appreciate that.